Okay, everybody, let's take a look at dentistry, dentists. I'm sure this reading these articles and watching these videos brings back all kinds of memories of your childhood, orthodontist appointments, and just like we covered the day before on hospitals yesterday, and we watched the New England Journal of Medicine article about how, oh my gosh, how far we have come to in the modern era of medicine and what things used to be. This covering dentistry should be remind us that pretty much the the modern form of helpful dentistry is sort of post World War II, just like it was for healthcare and medicine. Before World War II, I remember there's a saying that not a lot could be done for a lot of conditions, and in dentistry, uh, extraordinary amounts of, I mean, just science fiction things can be done, and that's in the last two or three generations. So you see these images of what life was like when you was do it yourself dentistry and things. I mean, things, people who were butchers were also dentists, and oh my god, you just look at this and you think, yeah, we've got issues still to this day, but I wouldn't trade places for that. Well, as you saw in the readings, what's interesting about dentistry is that it should be integrated with medicine. You should be, in some ways, dentistry should be another specialty of medicine. If you think about it, it's, we have all these different specialties. We have ear, nose, and throat doctors. We have pulmonologists for your lungs. We've got cardiologists for your heart. We have neurologists for your brain, on and on and on. Why isn't dentistry one of those specialties? Because it's in your, it's part of your body. It's, and as you saw from the documentaries, it's the entryway to all kinds of things that lead to either positive health or diabetes or inflammation, even cancer. So why is dentistry separate? And why is it not integrated with everything else in healthcare? Why is there separate dental insurance? And you have health insurance, you have dental insurance. And why is all of that? And that's the first article you read. It's based on this book um, with Mary Otto about the history of dentistry. And essentially, to boil it all down, a, a, a group of dentists in the 19th century, middle 19th century, went to the growing medical schools around Baltimore and said, hey, we want to be a part of this. We want dentistry to be more scientific with journals and accreditation and self regulation. And we want to make it a profession that's regulated. And the reality was, it was the big blow off. They call it the big rebuff. The medical leaders at the time did not see dentistry as in the same level of the rest of medicine. So they basically pushed them off. And when they weren't accepted in the medical circles, the dentists formed their own dental schools, their own dental journals, their own uh, admission exams. So instead of the MCAT, they take the DAT. And they just sort of built a parallel system that looks like med school, but it's dental school. And ever since then, even though there's been attempts by even by medical leaders to kind of bring dentistry back in, once the dentists went off on their own path, got their own dental schools, their own journals, their own associations, their own accreditation, their own reviews and tests, once they built that structure of professionalism, what was in it for them to basically collapse and subordinate it all into the medical profession? There was none, because they had their own empire, their own fiefdom. And hence, to this day, something that should very clearly be integrated isn't. They're two separate realms, and they have different cultures and a different ethos and a different way. Dentistry definitely has to be more business oriented because they have higher upfront costs, they have higher education costs, and they have less insurance coverage. So they have to think very, very much like a business to make sure that their revenues meet their expenditures, right? And she highlights, Mariotto in that interview highlights the unfortunate consequence of separating the dental health and the dental world from physical health in the medical world is that there are so many gaps in between. And if you don't have good dental coverage, you can end up in the ER with a medical condition. She describes Demonte Driver. This is one of those really, really sobering, horrible, just call it for what it is, horrible stories of a child who did not have access to dental care. And then his dental problems deteriorated, got worse, and were exacerbated, led to a big infection that entered his bloodstream, and then spread to his brain, and he died. And you think you can't die from the worst dental issues? Yes, you can, because your mouth's connected to the bloodstream, to your health in so many different ways. And so this is one of those stories that just reminds us that they are very, very integrally linked. And if you don't have access, like millions of Americans do not have access to good dental care, it's not just a dental tragedy, it's a medical tragedy as well. And as a parent, looking at a parent, I literally, I don't even know, I don't know how I would ever have dealt with that. I don't know how any parent deals with that. And this is another issue in dentistry because, and this is not just dentistry, you see this between physician assistants and primary care doctors, a sort of turf guardian, who's allowed to see patients and who has jurisdiction and scope of practice law. They're called scope of practice. They're just ways of saying who's allowed to see patients under what jurisdiction. And the article that you read about, both of them, highlight the fact that there are so many areas in the United States that don't have enough dentists. And so dental hygienists and dental assistants have requested the right to go in and not do complex dental procedures, but just to do the basic teeth cleaning that would be so valuable upstream to prevent the kind of thing that killed DeMonte Driver. And so you would think the dentist would be like, hey, go take that, it's all yours. But I think the reason that they push back on that is they say, well, if you're going to do that in areas that are underserved, what would stop you from coming into my suburban areas where there's actually maybe an oversupply of dentists? And you would come in and undercut all of us dentists, and you would take a lot of our patients for cleanings, and then we'd lose that business, even though it's not super lucrative. I hate to inform of you who are watching this that there's a business element to medicine and dentistry, but I would be, what? You wouldn't, I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that. And that sometimes the battles are not, it's like what Eric Topol wrote about when doctors should unionize. They should unionize on behalf of the public good, and then they could sort of also lobby for their own interests that are on behalf of the public good, and not just turf guard who's allowed to see patients where and when. That's an important thing. You don't want to just allow anybody to see any patient who has a need. That would open a whole separate set of problems of all kinds of malpractice, and patients would suffer. But in this instance, you have so many millions of Americans who need basic dental coverage. There aren't enough dentists, and dental hygienists could address a lot of these issues, but they're many times prevented from doing so. Now, some places the dental hygienists have sued and they've won, and there should be some arrangement made that places that are underserved can have other providers than just pure dentists. And so you should be bridging the divide between primary care, healthcare, medicine, and dental health. And if you guys want to see a great example of that, Justin Muir just graduated from U of R. He's going to dental school, and he did his HCS senior capstone on this integration of dentists working with primary care clinicians and primary care clinicians working with dentists, which the minute you say it, like, that is brilliant. That should totally be a thing where you have dentists and primary care clinicians, PAs, MPs, general practitioners, family medicine doctors should all be in one setting, overlapping their services. And so that the patient is getting dental health, is getting primary care health, because good dental care is primary care, right? Those shouldn't be separate worlds and separate buildings and separate professions. They should be colleagues collaborating with one another. And so there's actually some growing momentum behind this. She also talks about something that I actually posed as your discussion prompt today, which is, look at these. This is the American smile. This is what I will tell you in college. If you ask most people to smile, that's kind of what they look like. Because going to college requires some resources. And in our country, culturally, part of having resources or getting to a point where you have resources in life is associated with your teeth, how you look. The social six, as they call them, right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You wouldn't think what that looks like should be that important, but don't fool yourself. Clean, white, straight teeth is a subconscious signaler to everyone around you. Things like, I'm healthy, I'm in good shape, I'm doing well. It shouldn't mean those things, but it's a signal to other people in society, a subconscious marker of affluence is what it is, and of resources. And that's not natural. That's not the way most teeth come in, and they don't look that straight or that white for most people. But that's become the norm for middle class and up people in the United States. If you travel to other countries, it's always kind of interesting to see this is much more of an American thing, and other middle income and upper income countries in the world, that's not a thing. And people don't have straight teeth, and it's just not or overly white teeth. It's a cultural norm of beauty in the United States. Social six. Now, I would you might be tempted to say, well, I'm just not going to play by those rules, and I'm just going to have the teeth I'm going to have. And first of all, sometimes you need to have teeth straightened so they can all come in straight, all come in properly. But let's just say that's not even the issue. Can you just sort of disregard the social six and just have whatever teeth you have? You know, the nonconformist to me would love to say, hey, just let it rip. And if your teeth are over here and over here, whatever, you can do what you want. But I will tell you, why is dentistry important? What do you notice about this gentleman right here? 9 out of 10 people will notice this missing tooth he has long before they ever notice, if they notice at all, the fact that he's missing an eyebrow. And so I'm just telling you, missing teeth is something the eye just picks up. The eye expects symmetry and whiteness in people's smile. And when it's not there, like that's what you expect. When it's not there, your eye goes right in on it. And then later on, hey, by the way, he doesn't have an eyebrow. Oh, yeah, yeah. I guess he doesn't have one. But didn't see the teeth. When we did the week on bioethics and medical scarcity, and we have some of the images of Huntington, West Virginia, and the people in drug court, the thing I always notice when the people come up to the judge are their missing teeth. It's a marker. Now let me take you all back to middle school and high school for a moment. Not all of you, but for many of you, you sure remember all this stuff, all this effort and extraordinary expense. I don't know, extraordinary meaning like $3, 4, 5, $6,000 to have that social six. So, and I think most of you wrote in your SAC papers the same thing I remember, which is none of us ever asked any questions. We never said, well, wait a minute. Why do my teeth have to be straightened? Can't they just be the teeth that I have? No one at that age really ever thinks about that. But it's just almost like a rite of passage for middle class kids in the United States is to make sure those teeth are straight. Even though it's not necessary at all for public health or your individual health or anything, it's an appearance thing. It's a cosmetic thing. And go against it if you want, but you might feel self-conscious when you get out to society when most people you're working with who are professionals and facing people all day long. When you're always looking at someone and they're always looking back at you, whether you want to or not, they're oftentimes going to at least notice your teeth. It's like the mores of our society, which makes it all the more difficult if you don't have access to that. If you don't have great teeth, then you don't have that physical appearance. You don't send that signal. And often, if your teeth aren't healthy, you have to eat more processed food, which has all these downstream health ramifications that are very negative. And then I just want to, for those of you who've ever volunteered, as I have, in some of these free clinics, I've done ones with Remote Area Medical that work with Mission of Mercy. They're a dental group in Virginia. I think I've gone to about 10 of them. You never get used to the fact that the dental needs drive the lines, the sleeping overnight. The whole effort to manage the crowd is to manage the dental need. And that's when you realize, wow, my parents were able to provide dental care for me, or I was fortunate enough maybe to have good access to dental care for most of my life. If you did, not everybody does, but if you did, you probably took it for granted a lot. And in some instances, didn't want to go to the dentist. And then you realize, oh my God, these people here would trade places with you in a nanosecond to have the dental coverage you and I have. And I will tell you, as sort of sobering as it is to um, work at these free clinics, there's something exhilarating around people coming in down, discouraged, in pain, a lot of them in real pain, who haven't really felt comfortable smiling in a long time. And an hour after this work is done, it is transformative in pain reduction and appearance, and it has that sort of miraculous quality to it. But I have to remind all of us, this is the United States of America, where we have millions and millions of people who have to wait in lines for charity dental care. And I just hope none of us ever get habituated to or getting to view this as normalized, because this is just staggering and it's just so dehumanizing and degrading. And when you come into these clinics, unlike a normal dental office where you get a private room and privacy and your dignity is just completely intact. By virtue of necessity, these clinics just line them up and move them along. High levels of stress because dental care can be really terrifying. Pulling teeth, Novocaine shots, oral surgery. The teeth are there's a huge fear factor, and then you multiply that by a couple hundred people who are all fearful, and then waiting in line over the course of the day, so their blood pressure is going up and their anxiety is spiking. By the time you're in the middle of these things, it's palpable. You can really feel what it's like to not have access to great dental care. One of the things that was in that article, I literally copied here. This speaks to when you read the article, a lot of the people they profile say they vote for Trump, they're for Trump, and 8 years ago they voted for Obama. And the pattern for them is that these are tens of millions of people in the United States who end up having to go to these clinics that we've read about in and we'll read more about in the opioid overdoses, the deaths of despair. Tens of millions of Americans who feel left behind. They just feel like nothing. They see their income, their standard of living is deteriorating. They're having to hustle harder for less income. They have less access to the dental care and the things that make up a middle class life. And so their vote, basically, they go through series of protest votes. They vote for Obama in 2008 because he's different. He's an outsider. He's not the norm. He's not a traditional politician. And then 8 years later, they vote for Trump because they just want another, cage rattler, and they want someone who's disruptive to the status quo because the status quo isn't working for these people. And they don't like social media either. I really honed in on this, and I wonder if you guys saw this too. I know some students will just avoid social media because too much social media consumption is actually depressing. And this person said, "I'm just fed up with it." She said, "I don't do Facebook. All Facebook is I went on this trip, or I got this great new thing, or I got this new boyfriend, or new girlfriend, or new something that you don't have. And I really don't need to see how great you're doing all the time. It puts me in the state of depression." And I think there are tens of millions of Americans who have that feeling, and we can all relate to it. If you don't feel like your life's clicking along, getting on social media is the last thing you want to do, and the last thing you should do, because everybody's curating whatever's good and positive. Even LinkedIn, which I like, I scrolled through LinkedIn sometimes, and I could see instantly why a lot of people are like, "No, thank you." Everybody's announcing all the things that they're so grateful for and their congratulations and how pleased they are they got this new thing. And if you're in this situation, you don't. That's just offensive to them because things aren't going great. And I want to show you again, real quick. Look how costly dental school is. Dental school is more expensive than medical school, right? People coming out of dentistry school have more debt than, I think, what was the figure? They come out with, this is actually a couple of, I bet you they come out with almost $300,000 of debt for the average dental student. And that's more than the average medical student. So if you're logical and you have $200 to $300,000 of debt, and dental coverage isn't even as generous or widespread as medical insurance or health insurance, then you're sure gonna, and then you have to buy all the equipment to get your practice going, all the overhead to start a practice or to buy someone else's practice, what they sell to you. To get going as a dentist after you've already acquired all the debt itself is expensive. So where are you gonna locate your dental practice? Well, I think the average rational, logical person is going to say, well, who can pay? Where can we pay? Where can patients pay that can help me finance the cost of being a dentist? And I think I mentioned this at the beginning. Because dental coverage is less common, not as many people have dental insurance, and because it has more limits, that means that more dental coverage has to be paid for out of pocket, paid with cash. And because of that and all these very explicit costs, dentists are half-time business people. They have to be because they own their practices or they're involved in their practices. Dentists don't tend to work for large hospital health systems. There aren't many examples of that. Most dentists are in smaller practices. A lot of them are solo. And so they have to be very, very conscious of revenues and expenditures in a way that even your average clinician doesn't have to be that mindful of. Dentists have to be checking their expenditures, their revenues every week, every month, making sure that they can meet payroll, cover their expenses, pay their rent, pay their debts, it forces them to think like a business person. They don't really have a choice. Now, the unfortunate part of that is that means they tend to all over locate in places where they're less needed in affluent suburban areas and urban areas, where the greatest need or other parts of the country. Whereas if you're a young dentist, you think, I don't know if I want to work out in Huntington or Grundy. I'm not sure I'd ever be able to pay my bills and pay my costs. So that's a thing that drives the nature of dentistry. It's just the high cost of getting to be a dentist and then starting off as a dentist. All the costs, all of them are upfront before you ever see your first paying patient. Now, then we watched two documentaries that are just all about the sneaky ways that dental health is actually physical health. That so many of the chronic conditions that people have are, if not caused, then they're at least significantly contributed to by the quality of their dental health. And we see again, it's not even so much how often you brush, definitely brush, it's always great, but it's really the nature of your diet and how often you eat. It's those two things. Do you snack a lot and do you eat a lot of sugar? And if you do, then you're going to struggle more with dental health, even if you try to keep up and compensate with brushing. And then the BBC's whole thing about sugar and acid in your mouth and just all, I think the BBC show also shows how intensely personal dental health is. If you don't have confidence in smiling, then you keep your mouth closed all the time. If you have bad dental health, you become terrified of going to the dentist. It's truly scary because you just know that the longer you don't address it and the bigger the problems, the more painful it's going to be in the end. And yet, as you can see from the readings in the documentary, it's really unfortunate that dental health is separated from the medical world and the healthcare system because it should be deeply integrated. There should be this sort of synergy between primary care and dental care because one reinforces the other. Okay, hope you guys gained a new appreciation for dentistry and all the different dynamics around what makes dentistry a little different and separate from the rest of the healthcare professions and why it's kind of out there on its own and what caused that, what maintains it, and what drives the different sort of caregiving and business dynamics of being a dentist. And then also sort of the common issues of patients who need care, whether it's charity care for healthcare or optical care or dental care, the gaps that exist have real consequences. Okay, take care. The next class will be on pharmaceuticals and psychedelics.
You have stopped screen share.